Okay, I guess we'll get started. This is the Planning Commission, July 25th, 2022, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Can we go ahead and get the roll call real?
Commissioner Engelke,
Here.
Commissioner Egner,
Here.
Commissioner Vidal. Here. Commissioner Stokes. Commissioner Little. Here. Commissioner Mercer.
Here.
Commissioner McGann. Here.
All right, if everyone will stand, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Okay, now it's time for, hopefully y'all have had time to view the previous minutes from the last meeting. Y'all have time to review those. Do we have a motion? What's wrong with page 2? What would you say was wrong with it?
The items 3.
Next to last line. Down towards the bottom.
With that correction, is there any other corrections? Do we have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes for the last meeting. What date was that? 6/27/2022.
Okay, we got a motion from Commissioner Little,
Second.
second by Commissioner Egner. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal. Commissioner Stokes is absent. Commissioner Little.
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer.
Yes.
Commissioner McGann. Yes.
Okay. On to old business. Case number 2079 is still in being tabled till August, which will get us to our next case of old business, case number 2083. I will turn this over to Director Barr.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Commissioners, public. Thank you for coming out tonight. Yeah, this case was was on the agenda for last month, and we had some technical difficulties with the applicant from Atlanta, so it was tabled till this month. So it's a request for a conditional use for semi-truck parking land use at 6667 Pasadena Drive here in town. It's case 2083. It's on a parcel that consists of 16.83 acres plus or minus. The current zoning is M1, which is the light industrial district for the city. Next slide, please. So what we have here is this is right out of the city's zoning ordinance. It's Article 10. It talks about conditional uses. And so what's before the Planning Commission and ourselves tonight are the 6 factors, if you will, that they have to analyze a conditional use request. And so you see them enumerated there through letters A through F, and we'll go through those directly. Next slide. So this slide here shows the property layout, site plan, basically, if you will, of the case. As I said earlier, the application area is 16.83 acres. This is for a new land use. The existing zoning is M1, light industrial district. The area zonings in the area is M1 to the west, M1 to the north, C4, which is the general commercial district, to the east, and off screen there, actually off that picture there, you can see to the south is RM-6, which is the current use down there as an apartment complex. Next slide. So we get into item A of these conditional use permit items. So letter A is, will the request substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion? Supplied by the applicant. The proposed use would be very similar in character to the existing use on site and of the properties to the east and northeast, which all appear to be used currently for vehicles and or equipment storage purposes. There appears to be a semi-truck storage yard on the property directly to the east. Additionally, there are multiple land uses in the immediate vicinity, such as the logistics center and distribution center, which utilize semi-trucks on site. Given the existing use of the site and surrounding ones, it is not anticipated that the proposed use will substantially increase traffic hazards or congestion, nor will it adversely affect the character of the neighborhood. Staff analysis, one comment on the supplied by the applicant where it says the semi-truck storage yard on the property directly to the east. That's actually been removed because that was a zoning violation. And so the the property owner to the east is in compliance with that. Those semi-trucks have been eliminated over there. So the rest of staff analysis is that the applicant did perform a thorough traffic analysis of the existing conditions and the anticipated traffic from the proposed land use. Then that 21-page report is included in your monthly packet. It's in the packets that were in the back there. Let's see. Part E of that that traffic impact analysis, the conclusion section that is, does appear in the monthly packet. It obviously increases traffic, no doubt. The study shows turning left onto Goodman Road from Pasadena Drive is already at a poor level of quality, and adding more trucks there every day would make things worse. Now, one thing, when you look at, if you had a chance to look at the traffic impact analysis, think of it as grades for schooling. If you've been, remember high school days or college days, you know, A, B, C, D, and then you have F. So when it comes to a traffic study, there's what they call levels of service. And so if you have a level of service that's A of a traffic way or an area, you know, it flows very, very well. And then it goes all the way down to F, which basically is failing. But one thing that's different but from a traffic impact analysis and levels of service compared to, let's say, grades from high school or college is they also have a letter E in there. So it's A, B, C, D, E, and then F. So just to clarify on that. So in that traffic analysis, you'll see a lot of the numbers. They have the total numbers, but then they also have a lot of the numbers listed on an hourly rate. So a lot of that on a lot of those pages is an hourly rate. So, okay, moving on to B, supplied by the applicant, which is substantially increased fire hazards or not. There will be no storage of hazardous materials on site due to the nature of the use. Thus, this will not substantially increase fire hazard. Staff's analysis is that I don't know if all the trucks always be empty. We don't know what'll be in them. So I don't know if that, to me, that was kind of a concern. I don't know if most of the time they'll be empty and they'll be waiting, to be picked up, and then the drivers would take them to be filled, or if they'll be sitting there with cargo on board. Maybe the applicant might have a little bit more to add on that. That could be helpful. Item C, would the use adversely affect the character of the neighborhood supplied by the applicant? The proposed use would be very similar in character to the existing use on site and to the properties to the east and northeast, which all appear to be currently for use for vehicles and equipment storage purposes. This is very similar to wording before. There appears to be a semi-truck. Okay, that's exactly wording from before. Okay. So both in use and intensity, it is consistent with the current conditions and character of the surrounding uses in the area. It is a desirable use in the context of the surrounding industrial uses, the proximity to Memphis, and the nearby interstate highway access. It will not have a detrimental impact on surrounding or nearby property values. And staff analysis on that one is the subject property is located in an area of the city that is zoned M1 to the north and west of the subject property, and zone C4 to the east of the subject property, and then the RM-6 to the south of the subject property. Land uses include the following in relation to the subject property: north, various light industrial, intensive commercial with car auction lot to the northeast, grass fields to the east, multifamily residential to the south, and a mid-sized drainage pond on the west side. Trees along the subject's property's southeast, south, and southwest sides help to effectively screen the parcel from most other parcels. All in all, it seems like appears to be a good fit and location within the city for the request. Next slide. Item D, adversely affect the general welfare to the city as supplied by the applicant. As described above, the applicant proposes a development that is in keeping with the public health, safety, and welfare, and is not detrimental or injurious to the surrounding properties, as it is matching the current land uses. It is aligned with both the current and future planned land use in the proposed land use comprehensive plan for Horn Lake. Finally, given the importance of servicing and maintaining manufacturing, distribution, and logistics centers and supporting a more functional supply chain, permitting semi-truck parking in such a convenient location represents responsible growth and development in this area. From a staff analysis, I know that code enforcement has been an issue in town as there's been the proliferation of warehouses, so that's obviously added semi-truck parking. And code enforcement, as well as our department, gets routinely brought into the discussion where semi-trucks get parked into in residential areas in town. So the truckers are having a hard time finding legal places to park, and that's ongoing, that battle. And so if this was approved, obviously, hopefully that would ease that burden, as it would supply a location for trucks to be parked legally. Okay, next slide. And I'd like to thank Daniel from IT, working the slides over there tonight. So thank you, Daniel. Okay, letter E, overtax public utilities or community facilities as supplied by the applicant. The proposed use will have minimal demand on public utilities since it will not contain facilities that promote a high usage, if any, of water, sewer, or electrical service. Additionally, the existing impervious footprint is proposed to be maintained. Thus, the proposed development will not adversely affect the drainage of the surrounding area and public stormwater infrastructure. Staff would mainly concur with that, since it's not going to be, connected to a lot of the public services mentioned. Next slide. Oh, you're already there. Thank you. Letter F, be in conflict with the comprehensive plan supplied by the applicant. The proposed facility is consistent with the City of Horn Lake's comprehensive plan, both in use and intensity. It is consistent with the current conditions and character of surrounding uses in the area. So what I typically do when we get to the comprehensive plan, I try to break that down into about 4 spots or 4 categories. The first one is future land uses. And so here from part 5, goal number 1, under the land use section of the plan, pages 5 and 8, it says, promote the development of an appropriate mix of land use types that is responsive to market preferences as well as the community's economic development objectives. Obviously, the market with the advent of the warehouses is bringing semi trucks to town, so that's a market change, if you will. Also from part 5, but objective number 20, under the industrial subject, it's on page 13, it says, to the extent possible, encourage the centralization of all industrial land use activities. Thus, the request would help centralize a light industrial land use within the city, thus helping to fulfill that particular objective of the plan. The second category here is the general economy, which I refer people to the item 1 above because there wasn't really anything in specific there. Moving on, Janel's already ahead of me. So we got category 3, which is the transportation section. Part 5, goal number 1 from the transportation section of the plan, page 19. It says the following: provide for a safe, convenient, and efficient transportation system which accommodates all modes of travel with sufficient capacity to accommodate the present and future transportation needs of the city. Obviously, this is a tall order, and it's tested by the request. The supplied impact study or analysis is necessary, and it was good that the applicant did that. It tells us a lot. It says that both highways 51 north and Goodman Road west, which are near the subject property, are heavily trafficked areas with average daily traffic of 15,000 vehicles per day and 35,000 vehicles per day, respectively. Existing conditions point to poor turn times for traffic turning from Pasadena to Goodman Road, either desiring to go east or west on Goodman. And you'll see that from the traffic report from the levels of service where they scored so low with the letters of like E and F, those types of levels. Factoring the establishment of the requested use, this leads to further increased wait times to make turns onto Goodman Road, more nerve and patient testing of all drivers, especially the truck drivers, which their turns typically take longer time due to the larger and heavier vehicles that they drive. Continuing on, the conclusion from the traffic impact study report is the following, though. When complete, the development is expected to generate a total of 29 trips, 13 entering and 16 exiting during the AM peak hours, and 26 trips, 11 entering and 15 exiting during the PM peak hour. Overall traffic operations at the study intersections operate at acceptable levels of service during the AM and peak hours, except for the northbound and southbound approaches to the Goodman Road West, which is also Mississippi Route 302 at Pasadena Drive. The northbound approach shared lane movements are operating at level of service E and level of service F in the AM and peak hours, respectively. The southbound approach shared lane movements are operating at levels of service F in both the AM and PM peak hours. Traffic operations are expected to worsen as evidenced in the no-build conditions due to the anticipated growth in the study area. All right. Continuing on that same transportation category, the addition of project traffic is expected to have minimal impact on level of service and delays at the study intersections when compared to the 2023 no-build conditions. However, the northbound and southbound approaches at the Goodman Road West at Pasadena Drive continues to operate at level of service F. Minor approach queuing is expected to be less than 70 feet. It is noted that only 5 and 4 project trips are added to the northbound approach in the AM and peak hours, respectively, which is a nominal amount. Based on the analysis prepared for the proposed development, additional improvements of existing roadway and traffic control conditions are not required to mitigate the impact of the proposed development. That was the conclusion of the traffic impact study. Category number 4, community facilities. There's nothing that seems to be specific in support or against the proposed land use from this section of the plan. So that brings us to the possible motion of the request, which could be to recommend approval to the city's Board of Aldermen with the following condition or conditions attached. Number 1, the owner applicant shall bond to the city amounts to maintain the quality of Pasadena Drive and Dancy Boulevard based upon the expected type and number of vehicles traveling on those 2 roads to and from the requested land use. Amount to be determined by the city engineering. Number 2, the owner/applicant shall develop an emergency action plan, an EAP, to satisfy the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency, which is MEMA for short, because the property is located within the 100-year designated floodplain. There's been some discussion with the applicant on that particular one. There's like 3 different options that the applicant could take. That would be either to elevate the site, which there has been some elevation done to date. We don't know if it's enough to actually get it above the base flood elevation, which would, according to the city's floodplain regulations, would take 2 feet of freeboard to get above the BFE, the base flood elevation. Or they could tie down the trucks as they enter onto the site and are parked there for their duration of parking. Or the third one would be this emergency action plan as an option. Number 3, the owner/applicant shall maintain current presence of trees to effectively screen the land use from visibility from US Highway 51 and properties located south of the subject property. And number 4, the owner/applicant shall install a drainage/effluent collection system along the property's west side to collect runoff from the parking lot. That's in anticipation of new regulations that are coming from the federal government, that are going to the states, which are supposed to be passed down sometime next year to all the jurisdictions in the country, that have to do with stormwater management. And so we feel by having condition number 4 in there, that will help from a quality standpoint, be kind of ahead of the curve, if you will. That would be something that if the applicant could do, could help us as a jurisdiction stay in compliance with the Mississippi number 4 type permit. That's from MDEQ, which is Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality. That would conclude the presentation, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Barr. Does anyone have any questions for Director Barr? All right, do we have the applicant here? All right, you can come up to the podium and just state your name, address for the record.
AJ Colacerdo, 211 Perimeter Center Parkway Northeast, Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Sure. In that traffic impact study in the conclusions section, if you refer to figure 2, you'll see that there's 2 intersections that are studied, not just the Goodman Road intersection, so it's the Dancy Boulevard and the Goodman Road. And in the conclusions section, the Dancy Boulevard entrance has an A, B, and a C rating. So, and that will be the primary entrance and exit for these trucks, according to figure 7 on page 11, the percentages of which entrance will be used. Obviously, coming from the main highway north-south, they're coming westbound to 51, most likely traveling southbound, turning right hand. Dancy.
Would you speak into that microphone? We're having a
Sure,
hard time.
sorry. Apologies. Yeah, so they're coming from the interstate westbound towards 51, coming southbound on 51 and turning right onto Dancy Boulevard. Majority, it's 65% of the trips will be coming from Highway 51 onto Dancy Boulevard.
How much?
65%.
Okay, so my question would be, is this going to be some sort of, I mean, I'm assuming that you're going to have some sort of gated area for them, so that way y'all can charge for them to come in, or how are y'all going to do that? So is there going to be security there also?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Are you gonna have like cameras?
Most likely cameras. Currently, there's a security guard on site. One of the properties nearby monitors who's coming and going.
That's gonna be the next question.
Yeah.
So, is the entire portion in the 100-year floodplain?
No, there's the eastern portion of the property is outside of the floodplain.
Okay, and,
The floodplain line does come through the parking lot, yeah.
okay, and I'm assuming you're gonna park everything on the east side?
No, it'll be all throughout the parking lot within the floodplain.
You assigning spots to drivers to park, or are they parking where they please? Once they get,
Yeah, it's an open lot, so I think there'd probably be sections for it's intended to have multi-tenants. So there'd probably be specific areas for different tenants.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Can you explain your emergency plan in case we do get 4 inches of rain in 30 minutes?
That's a great question. I talked through this with Chad. We don't have a formal plan in place quite yet. We're still working through that. But there's opportunities for us to have truckers come in and relocate their vehicles to some truck stops or nearby gas stations that have overflow lots.
Okay, and can you help me understand a little bit about this traffic flow report?
Sure.
When it says peak hours, exactly what hours are they talking about? Are they talking about like 6 to 9 or 10 a.m.?
Correct, yeah. So it's peak traffic hour. So the morning when people are commuting to work and school and
Okay,
whatnot, and then PM.
And the trailers you're gonna have parked in there are gonna be like empty?
Sometimes they'll be empty, sometimes they'll be full. Yeah, so
And
they're there for an average of 3 days up to 3 weeks.
what control do you have over their content?
There's no hazardous material, or my client won't sign any agreements or sign up any tenants that have hazardous materials as a part of their business.
Okay, but there's no inspection.
There's no inspection now.
Any other questions?
I have a question, but I'm just really concerned about that traffic because, you know, Goodman and 51 is just awful anyway.
With regard to the traffic flow and the hours and the amount, are we talking about a truck entering and exiting every 30 seconds, every half hour? What are we talking about?
So in the AM hours, you'll see one trip every 5 minutes in the morning, entering the site, and then exiting the site, it's one trip every 4 minutes.
And that's in combination of 302 and 51, or
It is.
that's at each one?
Yes, sir. So roughly 65% of that goes to Dancy Boulevard.
So realistically, we're gonna be looking at backups in traffic at that.
Well, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I came down Goodman Road today and a tractor trailer exited right there where the Holiday Inn is and got out of there pretty easily, I think, and that was at 4 o'clock. So,
He got lucky.
well,
He got lucky.
you know, I'm just saying he could have very well gotten lucky. I don't know.
Yeah, if you hit it at 5 o'clock or at 8 o'clock in the morning,
So where do you imagine the backup would be if I'm not trying to eliminate you from the conversation,
Yeah.
but if we're having backups, are we having backups on Pasadena and Dancy?
I see it more as the other entrance. As you come down, Goodman from the interstate, you're already looking at a backup that's to Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't remember the name of that street, but, and beyond that. And, when you have trucks in that turning lane, you know, you're effectively trapped in that traffic until you can just wait through it. But when you turn left onto 51, you got the 2 lanes and all the traffic that's coming south from Memphis on 51. And that's a pretty good, that's the way I come home a lot of times. So there's a lot of traffic coming that way. Well, we just have a lot of traffic at that intersection. But I feel like there's going to be mainly at the turn left on 51 is going to be a nightmare in the afternoons.
For who? I'm just trying to get clarification.
Right now, if I come home on the interstate and I come west on 302 Goodman Road, I turn left onto 51 because Goodman Road is just ridiculous to try to keep going west on Goodman Road. So your one escape route down to 50, down south on 51 to Nail Road, now you're gonna have all that's 65% of all their trucks are turning off of 51 now, so.
When do
Yeah,
you,
You just gonna have to avoid Goodman Road in 51, basically.
when do you plan on going into business?
As soon as we were.
As soon as we give you a thumbs up.
Yeah, and if you want to take a look at figure 9 here, that kind of gives you an idea of AM, PM trips in each for our combined trucks and cars. You'll see in the AM hours, 9 cars and trucks are coming down 51, turning onto Dancy Boulevard. And in the evening hours, 6 trucks and cars are coming down 51, turning right onto. So
I can say, I will make this statement. I know that I've been around truck drivers all my life, and I understand how they can, how sometimes they can slow down the flow of traffic, but coming down south on 51 as they turn into Dancy Boulevard won't, I mean, you're not going to have 50 trucks down there like it's going to be a truck. They're going to slow down just like if you were driving down any other street. You got that, what is it, that warehouse just another half a mile down there that they'll be turning into. So we're going to have trucks. We've approved gas stations along Nail Road and other warehousing, so they are going to have a place to park. And I'd much rather have them park in a site like that and have that a little increase in traffic instead of them trying to park it in their driveways or parking lots that they're not allowed to park in.
Gotcha, but.
So that's just my thought on it, because these truck drivers, they're the professionals, and they will find the best way to come in and out of that lot without, because they want to get going just as much as anybody else. So that's just my thoughts on it. Anyway, do we have any other conversation or discussion? All right, do we have a motion? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I seen it on here. All right, so thank you, sir. Thank you. You can have a seat, sir.
Oh.
All right, this is open for public hearing. Mr. Miller, you can come up.
For the record, my name is Francis J. Miller. I am a voting registered resident of Ward 5, City of Horn Lake, 14 years, 21 years of South Haven, and I have been involved in all decisions I could in the welfare of the citizens. Number one, Horn Lake, DeSoto County needs this parking spot in the worst of ways. The whole economy is based on the movement of goods. These poor truck drivers have nowhere to go. South Haven is working on, I've heard something like 50 or whatever parking. They realize they got to help these truckers. Horn Lake has a golden opportunity here to move this material in our whole county with these poor drivers they have to live. They can't drive 24 hours a day. They got to pull over by government regulations. Where do they put that rig? Horn Lake has an opportunity to try to find a way to make it legal, safe for them to do that. And there is a major filling station being built in Horn Lake to service this special diesel fuel for these truck drivers in this area. This station is going to have 6 bays with the high-tech diesel that they can't get anywhere else in about 4 states. All that revenue will come into Horn Lake's coffers on that diesel fuel. These truck drivers are going to find that out. They're going to fill up those trucks in Horn Lake, and we get that revenue also. Then we also help develop the reputation that Horn Lake is willing to help the nation move their goods safely, park it. It's got to be parked somewhere. Now, Mr. Barr, our director, does an enormously good job in trying to fulfill all regulations everywhere. He even brought out the future regulations that are going to come down on this floodplain. Horn Lake has been plagued with flooding problems. They're working on that. They'll solve it. Traffic, like our chair said, these truck drivers are not stupid. They will find a way to move their trucks as quick as they can. They don't want to block traffic. They want to move. They will find a way to move. Now, you, the Planning Commission, have got to work with our Director Barr to find a way to make this thing work. Get these trucks off the street in Horn Lake and sell that diesel fuel in Horn Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anybody else that would like to speak in the public? All right, we're going to close the public hearing. Do we have any other conversation or comments from the commissioners? All right, do we have a motion?
Chairman,
Yes.
after review of application case number 2083, conditional use, a request for semi-truck parking, land use proposed to be located at 6667 Pasadena Drive on land zoned M1 Light Industrial District consisting of 16.85 acres. Horn Lake Planning Commission recommends approval to the city's Board of Aldermen with the following conditions attached. The owner applicant shall bond to the city the amount to maintain the quality of Pasadena Drive and Dancy Boulevard based upon the expected type and number of vehicles traveling on those two roads to and from the requested land use. Amount to be determined by the city engineer. The owner applicant shall develop an emergency action plan to satisfy the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency because the property is located within the 100-year designated floodplain. The owner applicant shall maintain current presence of trees to effectively screen the land use from visibility from Highway 51 to the properties located south of the subject property. And the owner applicant shall install a drainage collection system along the property's west side to collect runoff from the parking lot.
Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Egner, a second by Commissioner Mercer. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Vidal? Commissioner Stokes is out. Commissioner Little?
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer?
Yes.
Commissioner McGann? Yes. Commissioner Egner?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, on to new business. Case number 2088, a request for site plan and design review for a proposed gas station with 4 commercial bays at approximately 4955 US Highway 51. Landowner developer IPD Solutions is the engineer, consisting of 3.28 acres plus or minus. It is currently zoned as a C4 planned commercial district. I will turn this once again over to our director, Mr. Barr.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's correct. Next slide there, please. Uh-oh. Yeah, I think that'll work. Go ahead to the next slide there, if you could. Thank you. Yeah, so this is a kind of a change in gears from the last case, which was a conditional use. There was a request on property rights. This one here is a site plan design review, or as the chair said, for a gas station. And so I break those into three sections. We have architectural standards, the site plan layout, and then the landscaping portion. So here we start with the architectural standards from the city zoning ordinance. Talks about the purpose for those. Next slide. So item number one is from what was supplied by the applicant. There's a requirement in the city ordinance that the dumpster must be enclosed with similar material of principal principal material as the principal building. I think that's what I'm trying to say, or made of brick, stucco, split face block, etc. There is an enclosure provided on the site plan, but no details of materials. Please provide details that would comply with the city standards. Item number two has to deal with roof pitch, as we see often. The requirement is for buildings that are less than 10,000 square feet, which is the request here is less than 10,000 square feet for a roof pitch of at least 5 to 12 to 12, then that's required. If not possible, a flat roof should include parapet articulation on the front facade of such a building. I believe there is some like parapet as well. Perhaps the applicant can further detail that later on. So we just request that they meet the standard there. So now we get onto the site plan layout portion. Next slide, please. What it says here as a portion of that, it says a site plan design review. If it's approved tonight by the Planning Commission, that approval would be good for a year. So what we have here is item number three. There's a requirement in the city's subdivision regulations, but lots of times I like to include it in the site plan design stage as well about sidewalks. So sidewalks are required along US Highway 51 North. So please show that on future drawings, and that would meet the city's standards. Number four, oops, go back, please. Thank you. Tree mitigation. Chapter 14, Article 3 of the city's code requires that tree mitigation, if trees are present prior to development, be addressed. In this case, there are trees that are present on the site. And so to ask that, we would ask that the applicant perform a tree survey of the existing status and then proceed according to this chapter and article of the city code. As you can see from there on this particular slide, you can see some of the features that are proposed. Got the entrance point there off of Highway 51. Then there's also a rear entrance point that actually comes down from Church Road, and then it comes down to the south on the west side of the existing Walgreens, and then it would service this site. You can see the trash dumpster down in the would be the southwest corner of the subject property. They've also proposed a dog park, 2 locations for fuel pumps, and they do, which is commendable. They do have 4 charging stations up in the north portion of the property. That's something that the state is looking at in their plans to the Federal Highway Administration. They're supposed to have something to the Federal Highway Administration by August 1st, where they're promoting charging stations. And at least last time I talked to MDOT, they were looking at a plan that would encourage development of charging stations within 1 mile on either side of any interstate within the state. Now, whether that would involve incentives or that sort of thing, I'm not sure what the final wording will be, but that is something at least MDOT is currently working on. So we see a lot of modern day contemporary features here that are planned by the applicant. And so then moving on, we've got the landscape and screening portion of the site plan design review. It just talks about why we have landscaping and the reason for that in the city code. Next slide. And one item here, which will be the 5th overall, the requirement is interior landscaping. It's inside the development area for at least 20% of the total parcel. And in this case, nothing is needed. 36% of the site is proposed to be landscape, so they should be commended. They've done very good as far as thinking things through. From a technical definition, there is a streetscape type A that would be interfacing with the Highway 51. Next slide. So the end here, a possible motion is for approval of the request with the following conditions or clarifications. Number one, add details about the dumpster enclosure materials. Number two, provide location and design of sidewalks based upon city requirements and install per drawing revisions. Number three, perform the tree mitigation study and comply with Chapter 14, Article 3 regarding trees per the city code. And then number four, provide one off-street loading space per Article 7, Item L, items 1 through 4 per the city zoning ordinance. That's one thing I didn't bring out earlier, but that is a code requirement of at least one off-street loading space. So that would conclude the presentation unless you have any questions.
Does any of the commissioners have any questions for Director Ball? All right, is the applicant here? Come on up here and give me the name and address, please.
Chance Walker, 8180 Airways Boulevard, South Haven.
Okay, so you have anything to add?
Sure, so we do have updated plans that show the sidewalk on 51. So that's been updated, 5-foot sidewalk. The dumpster enclosure will be exactly the same architecture as the building. And we are in process of doing a tree survey this week on that lot.
Director Barr, have you received that updated plans?
No, I don't think so as of yet, no. But the applicant's been really good to work with, so I've been trying to keep the lines open for communication of the things that come up of these items, and so looks like they're being preemptive as far as trying to meet some of the conditions, so.
All right, so does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
Yes. Of the tree mitigation study being conducted.
This week, yes, ma'am.
Director Bond.
We'll be performing it this week. Yep.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Do you, regarding the overnight parking for your RVs, do they have a sewage dump or a potable water intake in those sites?
It won't be sewer hookup. They'll just be electrical. So they'll have to keep their sewage, in their RV or however it's typically maintained, but there won't be sewer hookup.
Okay.
Will you have overnight security for the people that stay there?
So we have a planned, what we're calling like a kiosk type area, but the service station will be 24/7 that monitors the RV overnights.
And will you have inspections to make sure that people aren't dumping their?
Not to my knowledge, but I mean, that's something that we can definitely,
As a facilities manager, I can tell you if they need to do it, they're gonna do it wherever they're at. They don't care. So,
yeah,
it would be a
that's
nice-
definitely something that we can.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's on your drawing or not. I hadn't looked at it that close. Is there a storm drain right there where those overnight parking?
There is not a storm drain now, and we aren't proposing one either, so.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, do we have any motion?
Chairman?
Commissioner Egner.
After review of application number 2088, SPDF, a request for the site plan and design review for the convenience store with 4 commercial bays and fuel pumps proposed to be located at 4955 US Highway 51 North. And that's not the exact address possibly. On the land zone C4 consisting of 3.28 acres, Horn Lake Planning Commission approves the request with the following clarifications. 1, add the details about the dumpster. 2, provide the location and design for sidewalks as required by the city. 3, perform tree migration or mitigation studies and comply with Chapter 14, Article 3 regarding trees per the city code. And 4, provide one off-street loading space per Article 7, Item L, number 4-1 per the city zoning ordinance.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal, Commissioner McGann, yes.
All right, looks like we have passed. Thank you, sir. All right, on to more new business. Case number 2089, a request for zoning amendment at 5725 US Highway 51 North, from an R10 residential medium density, 10,000 square foot minimum district to a C3 general commercial district and a C4 plain commercial district consisting of 19.17 plus or minus acres. All right, turn this back over to Director Barr.
Thank you, Chair, and we'll shift gears once again. So this is a rezoning request. It's different from both of the previous two cases. Next slide, please. So as we've seen with conditional use requests, there are items listed in the city zoning ordinance that are for analysis, if you will, by both the Planning Commission and the governing body. In this case, it's no different, even though some of the factors are different, and so those are enumerated up above. So this is from Article 10, which has to do with different applications of the city, specifically item B. And so there's 4 basically sub-items, if you will, of number 5 here. It's A, B, C, and D. So I'll go through those as those factors of analysis, if you will. Next slide. So first, to start off with, just kind of give us a pictorial reference of the subject property. As you can see it in the center, highlighted with the blue line. And it's basically a dual request. The existing zoning of the entire parcel is R-10, but the request is for dual zoning, which I checked with legal counsel, and that's something we can do in Mississippi if it's something that in the end that's approvable by the Planning Commission and the Board of Aldermen. So they could theoretically approve both, in this case, a request for C3 zoning and C4. So as you can see there, I've tried to demarcate, if you will, the 2 areas of desire by the applicant. And you'll see the C4 request, which has frontage there along Highway 51, and then the more interior area, which is the request of the C3 zoning. You'll see that there's PUD type zoning to the north, which is currently under development of the, I believe it's Rolling Acres subdivision. There's also to the east, there's a mixture of PUD zoning, which is an RV park and some storage, looks like mini storage. And then also in South Haven, across the street there to the east, there's some R-30 zoning. That's something that they have. To the south, there is R10 zoning. And then there's also to the west, there is also R10 zoning. And both of those areas are already pre-developed with single family residences. So what I'll do here is I'll kind of go into some detail about the request as far as the specificity of what's being requested per the zoning districts. And so you'll see here under item C up there, it talks about medium density residential district. That's something we see in the, excuse me, in the comprehensive plan. And the R-MD district is intended to provide suitable areas of medium density residential development where complete urban services and facilities are provided, or when the extension of such services or facilities will be physically and economically facilitated. Single-family detached dwellings and accessory uses there to characterize this R-MD district. This district also permits community facilities, public utilities and open space which specifically serve the residents of this district or which are benefited by the compatibility with a residential environment. And so you can see the different districts that are listed that are part of this medium density residential type category, which basically is the current zoning of the property. So you see the R15, R12, the R10, which is the exact zoning of the property, R9, and then R8. And then it lists there, all of those districts range anywhere from 2.9 to 5.5 dwelling units per acre. That's what that DUA stands for. So then from the zoning ordinance here, so it switches to letter G, which talks about the general commercial, which is the C3 zone. So specifically, the C3 district is intended to provide for modern, attractive, and efficient retail, personal, and professional commercial facilities with access needs which demand location along roadways other than major arterials. Uses permitted in this district are frequently automobile-oriented. Commercial land uses, which is not necessarily to serve local neighborhoods and which might be harmful to nearby residences shall be discouraged. And then letter H from the zoning ordinance, which talks about the planned commercial district, specifically the C4 zone. This district is intended to permit the development and maintenance of planned commercial developments, including shopping centers characterized by single structure or integrated complex of structures with planned building locations, parking and loading areas, driveways, and landscaping. Such planned commercial developments may be designed to serve areas ranging from a neighborhood to the entire urban area. This district should be adjacent to one or more major roads as designated in the comprehensive plan, transportation plan, and may be adjacent to any area zoned or used for residential purposes. If appropriate, landscape screening is provided to adequately buffer the residential use from the incompatible noises, streets, and lighting. This district will replace the former C2 commercial district. So at one time, the city had a C2 zone, but that was replaced many years ago by this C4, this planned commercial zoning district. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what I tried to do here with the C3 zone, because that's the bulk of the request as far as area of the area being, of the two areas, two districts being requested, is I've basically pulled right out of the zoning ordinance all the land uses that are permitted by right. So if the C3 is granted, these are all uses that would be permitted by right of any landowner to approach the city to develop. So I won't read all of those. I'll just, we'll just pause here for a few seconds because there's like 3 pages or 3 slides that make up this list because I think there's a total of like 60 different uses. But what it is, it's broken into different categories, if you will. There's commercial category, which is the most extensive. Then there's an industrial category, and I believe there's one more, I think agricultural. So yeah, so what you can see there is basically the 57 land uses that are permitted with C3 zoning if it's commercial. And then you see, I think there's there's two uses that are industrial land uses that are permitted in the C3 zone. And then the veterinary clinic is the sole agricultural type use. And of course, with most of the zones in the city, special events can be requested. And so this would be no exception here as well. So I can go ahead. Next slide, please. Thank you. Moving on to the factors here. Letter A, how the proposed amendment would conform to the comprehensive plan and its related elements as provided under section 17-1-9 of the Mississippi Code of 1972 as amended. So I've tried to address that. Supplied by the applicant, there was nothing specifically supplied by the applicant. So again, as I did with some of the other things, I try to break it down into different categories of the comprehensive plan since this factor deals with that. So number 1 has to do with future land use. The proposed land use map from the 2003 City Comprehensive Plan shows for the area that is requested for C3 zoning is designated for the medium density residential development. The city's comprehensive plan defines medium density from 3.6 units per gross acre to a maximum of 7. So I don't know why there's a difference between the zoning and the comprehensive plan. I don't know if one has to do with net gross acres or one's gross, or if there's just a difference. I can't explain that, but there's a difference. So that's from part 6 of said plan, pages 9 through 10. The existing R10 zoning provides for this type of density. For the area that is requested as C4 zoning, the same proposed land use map shows the area for future commercial development. So the C4 request is in line with that. The C4 zoning district is the city's highest end commercial zoning district, or most intense, if you'll think of it as that. Number 2, goals and objectives from the plan. This is various that seem applicable. Small letter I. This is from part 5, goal number 1. I'm going to switch to my own notes here to help me read. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Part 5, goal 1, under the land use section of the plan, pages 7 and 8, it says promote the development of an appropriate mix of land use types that is responsive to market preferences as well as the community's economic development objectives. Number 2, the same also from part 5, goal 4, page 7, it says aggressively promote the protection, preservation, and stability of the city's residential neighborhoods and areas of cultural and or historical importance. 3, part 5, objective number 4, under the land use section of the plan on page 8, it says accommodate a range of housing choices, including types and prices balanced and in harmony with existing residential neighborhoods. Next slide. Okay, so this is 4 or sub 4, if you will. This is also from part 5, objective 7, under the residential land use section of the plan, page 11. It says, generally, the city should encourage compact residential development patterns that provide for the preservation of open space that is interconnected with a network of like-kind development. Sub 5, also from part 5, objective 11, page 12, it says, discourage urban development that is disconnected from readily available urban services. Number 6, add from part 5, objective number 15, page 12, it says transition buffers should be utilized to protect residential areas from more intense land uses. 7, sub 7, continuing also part 5, objective number 17, page 17, it says commercial and office land use should follow a nodal or a node approach adjacent to major road corridor intersections versus linear strip development patterns. Sub 8, which is part 5, objective number 7, page 15, it says protect residential neighborhoods from the encroachment of incompatible land uses and through traffic. And then sub 9, lastly, part 5, objective 11, page 25, community facilities and services should be used as a tool to guide or discourage development in specific directions. I put that one in there because it's the area under request is right next to fire station number 2 in the city. So that's a community facility that serves the community. Moving on to category number 3, general economy. With the existing R10 zoning, this means that potential future single-family residential development. That means a rise in various property taxes within the jurisdiction. With the proposed C3 and C4 zoning district, this means a potential for a commercial service area within Horn Lake. This means a rise in retail sales tax. Okay, very good, Daniel. Going on to category number 4 of letter A, which is transportation. It's seen here as a positive feature that the area under rezoning application, whether approved or not, is federal highway route, US Highway 51 North, consists of 100 feet of road right-of-way width, which is paved, consisting of 5 lanes, 2 lanes northbound and 2 lanes southbound, and a center turning lane. One poor aspect of the parcel is whatever is developed, whether it's residential, commercial, will be basically an interior development enclave. When I say that is that the areas surrounding it have already been developed. And when you look at that, there was no planning or pre-planning for any connectedness, whether that be a road or a pedestrian way or a sidewalk. And so it's those land use patterns are already set. So we have kind of this enclave, so everything will open out basically onto Highway 51. Okay. Number 5, community facilities. I just stated Horn Lake Fire Station number 2 is located adjacent to the subject parcel. Latimer Lake Park is about 1.3 miles to the west of the subject parcel via direct aerial route. Going on to letter B, why the existing zone district classification of the property in question is inappropriate or improper. Nothing supplied by the applicant. Staff analysis, the existing R10 zoning seems appropriate for its location. The front portion of it along Highway 51 where the plan calls for commercial land uses may be inappropriate because of its because it's not in conformance with the plan's future land use map. But then remember, that map is 19 years old because of the age of the plan itself. So I just asked the question, how well does that particular map reflect the current desires of the city of Horn Lake today? It's hard to know for sure. Okay, moving on, letter C. What major economic, physical, or social changes, if any, have occurred in the vicinity of the property in question that were not anticipated by the comprehensive plan and have substantially altered the basic character of the area, which makes the proposed amendment to the official zoning map appropriate? Nothing was supplied here by the applicant. Staff analysis, most of the area or the vicinity development was in place before the 2003 comprehensive plan was adopted by the city. A portion of now called the Jellystone RV Park, which is located east, on the east side of Highway 51 and across the street from the northeast corner of the subject property, began development between 2007 and 2009. It was completed by 2013. The area currently under single-family residential development of 34 lots and located directly north of the subject property is the River Oaks Phase 2 subdivision. The preliminary plat of that has been approved and installation of public improvements is ongoing to current day. A lot has happened to various parts of the city since 2003. The city has added population, housing units, commercial development has occurred, as well as the advent of large warehouses from the light industrial side of land uses. Does the summation of all that support the entire zoning request or just say a portion, say like the C4 requested portion? As a note, a similar request for commercial zoning on this very same parcel was heard by the city in early last year. I think it was January or February for the same parcel, same type of commercial request, and that was eventually denied. We do have in the zoning ordinance, we have a 1-year prohibition if someone wants to request a rezoning on the same parcel, and the city has denied that, so we have a 1-year waiting time. But that is basically passed, as we're basically, the applicant filed the application 17 months after that original denial. So, so therefore, they're able to file and under consideration today. Next slide. Letter D, demonstrate the public need for the proposed zone district amendment. Nothing supplied by the applicant. Staff analysis, traffic counts on portions of Goodman Road located in the area of the intersection of US Highway 51 and Goodman Road approach close to 40,000 vehicles a day, with even higher numbers as one travels closer to interstates 55 and 69 on Goodman Road west of the viaduct. These are very high numbers and often lead to traffic congestion instances. Having an area such as this request zoning that is commercial may help alleviate some of the Goodman Road west congestion by creating commercial service destinations in another location of town. The area known as DeSoto Commons Planned Unit Development, PUD, which is located northeast of the subject property and consists of several properties and hundreds of acres, is currently being developed both commercially and light industrially. The proposed commercial zoning, if approved, would help serve and support other areas of the city that are currently developing. So it seems plausible reasoning that there's public need within the community for additional commercial zoning and thus commercial land uses. The request, if approved, would help fill this need. So, and then the last slide, thank you. So there's a possible motion here. I left it open for either approval or denial. Obviously, with the rezoning, there's really no sense to add conditions. I suppose you could. It's a little more difficult. So mainly just looking for either a recommendation for approval or denial to the governing body. And I believe the applicant's here. And this,
Okay.
this would also be a public hearing.
All right, so does anybody have any questions for Director Barr?
I do. Since we are not currently aware of what will be built and receive the new change, if approved, how does this fit within the city's comprehensive?
Very, very good question, Commissioner. So that's why in the PowerPoint, which I'm also using that as a staff report. That's why I listed all those different land uses. So that's why sometimes rezoning can be a very difficult question to consider for a planning commissioner or an alderman, because it's not like a conditional use permit request where they were just asking for semi-truck parking. So basically, you're contemplating 60 different land uses that could be there. And there might be some things on the list you go, well, this, I could see this fitting, and other things that maybe not so much. And so it's a much more difficult request. And so what I tried to point out in the PowerPoint is that the future land use map, which now that dates all the way back to 2003, along on the west side of Highway 51 actually calls for commercial development there. So to me, I'm thinking the C4 request is probably in line with that, unless you feel differently, which you may very well feel that. Now the C3 area, that's more different, because the future land use map from 2003 calls for that medium density residential, which the R10 zoning, which is there now, fits with that designation perfectly from a density standpoint. So I tried to lay it out as that, and then you'll just have to look at the factors and kind of weigh them in your mind to see where you want to go with this. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
My question is, and just for clarification now, this request is either for both or none, or could you approve one side or the other if the applicant was wanting, I mean, you know what I'm saying on that?
No, yes, that's a very good question. No, if it's inclined by the planning commission, if you want to say, recommend yes on the one question and no on the other, you certainly can do that. I did check with legal counsel, and legal counsel said it was well within the purview of an applicant to ask for dual zoning, and so that's why I went ahead and brought it to you as a dual request. So if you feel inclined, like one portion you want to recommend yes, and the other portion you want to recommend no, you can do that, or you can go all, yay or all nay.
Okay.
Since the bulk of the rezoning is C3, and like I said, we do not know build, you're saying that we can go ahead and approve the 3.998 and deny.
If you feel inclined, yeah, there's definitely support from the comprehensive plan for the C4 request. And the applicant or landowner, they're not bound, even if they came here before you and said, I want to do X use, they're not bound to do that. If eventually the C3 or C4 was approved, if they wanted to do something else that was on the permitted by right list, they could do that. So they're not bound. So that's what makes it tricky on a rezoning, because you got all those different land uses.
So my next question is, if we do not approve it, and they come back and say we're gonna bring a gas station, which is, okay with it, then we could go ahead and approve it. We know what it is.
Well, and that's a good question. The rezoning quest is like the most fundamental request that would come before you, because we're talking about property rights. So once property rights are obtained, let's say eventually approved by the alderman, then the zoning would change. And so then an applicant would be open to go whatever's permitted by right in that particular zoning. In some instances, that would maybe require an additional hurdle of a conditional use, which might be like one specific use or a couple of specific uses or whatever. And then that doesn't even address like where they would have to, if it hasn't been platted before, they would have to plat, and then still when they finally get to the development stage, they would have a site plan design review. So there's multiple steps in the entitlement process, if you will. I don't know if that answers your question or not. I'm not trying to sidestep your question. I'm just trying to.
I don't want to deny it and then come back and do something that fits within it. I don't want to approve it.
Mr. Barr? So if we approve both of these, regardless of what they put in there, whether it be a restaurant or a beauty parlor, they're still going to have to come and get approval to build that business. Is that correct?
Well, yes. If let's say you recommend, let's say the planning commission recommended approval on C3, C4 requests, I take that to the alderman. If they approve that, then whatever an applicant wants to do per the zoning ordinance through either the C3 or C4, whatever's permitted by right, that's what they would have to go down that path. But then they would still have further entitlements that they would have to get, which could include a conditional use, would include potentially platting, because I don't think this has been platted before, and then also site plan design review if it was like commercial.
So basically, if they said they were going in for a bakery, say, just example, and then they came back when they decided they finally wanted to put in a laundry service, laundry with all of its chemicals, there's no way that we could deny that usage?
Well, if, let's say, I don't have the list in front of me, but let's say if the bakery land use was permitted by right, it is, yeah, it's number 5, so it would be permitted by right, and then we have dry cleaning on there.
Yeah, dry cleaning is like 17.
Yes, 17 and 18, so that would also be permitted by right. So if, yeah.
I think the question is more of, do we need to read the area to see that, I don't know. It's a question,
Is the applicant here?
you know? That's all.
All right, if you'll come up here and give me your name and number, and address for the record.
Yes, sir, my name is Paul Patel, and my address is 7276 Casino Street, Boulevard. And we try to build that land for RV park and the shopping center front of this. C4, we try to build shopping center, and C3, we try to build the RV park over there.
So I guess my question would be to you real quick is if we approve the C4, would you want, if we could do that tonight where we approved one and not the other, would that affect what you do, or would you, or is this more where you're looking to change the whole thing or nothing at all?
Yes, we can do that one, yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to put that.
I'm sorry, what was going in?
Like a C3, we can try to build the RV park, you know?
A what?
Is RV park.
RV park.
And the C4, we try to build the shopping center front of the road.
So any questions for the applicant?
I know whenever it came up for us before, we talked about the floodplain. Has anything been, because of the flooding that they're,
No, ma'am, they got no any flood zoning in that land.
Yeah, if I remember right, there's no designated 100-year floodplain. There isn't any on the subject property.
okay.
Any questions?
Well, I'm still a little bit confused. If we approve C3 and C4, that doesn't automatically give him a green light to build anything on that 60-item list without coming before this commission again, does it?
As far as, let's say eventually the request gets approved as requested, then as the landowner, he could pick from any of the 60, and he would have permitted by right. That means you're basically, if the city approves it, you're granting additional property rights above and beyond what's allowed in R-10. So now, like in this case, he specified he'd like to do an RV park for the C3 portion. Now, the zoning ordinance requires a conditional use on top of the C3 zoning for that specific use. So he would have to come before you if the C3 was approved on the RV park through a conditional use request. So that would still come
Okay, but
forward.
in Commissioner Little's example, he couldn't get approval for a bakery and halfway through change his mind and do a laundromat without coming back before.
He would not have to come back before. He would, if the C3 is granted per the list, any of the 60 would be allowed by right. He'd still have to do a platting and site plan design review, but as far as the actual land use itself, any of the 60 would be permitted by right.
Okay, but he would have to do the siting and the site plan design review.
Yes, he'd have to do a plat, subdivision plat and site plan design review, yes.
I have another question. Within the city's comprehensive plan, how much more rezoning it doesn't have to be a definite number. Who foresee, say we get 10 more applications, wanting to rezone for 3, where do we draw the line? That's basically what I'm trying.
I see, yes. Basically, we'd have to go by really the only thing that we've got is a map, would be that future land use map as a guide, but then also remember it's 19 years old. So what was true 19 years ago may or may not be applicable today, in your opinion, as far as appropriate. So that's what the age of the plan makes that more difficult to say conclusively.
So here, I guess here would be my question for you, Director Barr, is let's say that we approve the C3, the C4, because we know what he has described as his intended use, but he comes back before us for conditional use, and we deny that conditional use, the aldermen deny that conditional use. Then we're stuck with this being a C3 at that point. we've already changed the zone, and if somebody wanted to come back and later put residential there, we'd have to go back through another zoning.
That is
Here.
correct,
Okay.
yes.
Just wanted to put that out there also. Any other questions for the applicant? Do we have, this is a public hearing, so we're going, you can go ahead and have a seat, sir, and we're going to open this up to the public. Mr. Miller.
For the record, my name is Francis J. Miller, a 14-year voting resident of Ward 5 in the city of Horn Lake. I want to tell you, in case you don't know, make a statement. I was an official negotiator in the bankruptcy of Northwest Airlines in Supreme Court. When a person says, I am going to put parking, RV, or whatever, it means absolutely nothing in a court of law, and you cannot make any decision based on that statement. Now, there have been no details. I am scared more than I care for Horn Lake. I care we need money, we need development, we need everything. There was no evidence of anything concrete for you to make any decision on anything on this property, and you could find yourself in a ton of problems if something doesn't turn out to be what you think you heard, and you heard nothing legal tonight. With all my heart, I ask you to deny this whole thing until you're given better information, and Barr, our director, can handle that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right, do we have any other questions or comments? All right, do we have a motion?
Okay, after review of application case number 2089RZ, request for the, is this the correct one? Because I'm
You're right.
I'm confused up and down with this thing. Request for the zoning amendment at 5725 US Highway 51 North, Petruchia? Petruchia, okay. Owner from R10 residential medium density, 10,000 square feet minimum district to C3 general commercial district and C4 planned commercial district, consisting of a total of 19.17 plus or minus acres. Specifically requested 15.18 acres for C3 and 3.99 acres for C4. The Horn Lake Planning Commission recommends denial to the city's Board of Aldermen, regardless of the direction of the motion. The Planning Commission, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay.
All right, so we got a motion for denial to the City Board of Aldermen. Do we have a second? All right, we have a second. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal, Commissioner Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner McGann. Yes.
All right, so that one has been denied. All right, before we go on to the new business, can we take a 5-minute break? Please? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
more plan. Not a. Yeah.
Okay, we'll get back on to the new business. Case number 2090, a request for subdivision final plat. Name the the subdivision for a 1-10T commercial subdivision located approximately at 1700 addressing block of Nail Road West in Horn Lake. It is for land zone as C3 General Commercial District consisting of 11.13 acres plus or minus. Mr. Barr, you've got the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, in the paper version that you have, where it says that's supposed to be one lot, it's correct on the screen up there, but it reads funny because you said 10T, but that's what I give you, so that was an error on the paper version, but I did correct it on the PowerPoint where it says one lot. And so we're shifting gears again, where we had other stuff, other entitlement requests. Now we're on to subdivision, which we've seen before. So next slide, please. So yeah, this basically is from the city subdivision regulations. In this case, this has the definition of a minor subdivision, which this is. It's just a one-lot subdivision. By definition, anything up to 3 lots. If it doesn't create the need for public improvements, whether that be city sewer, city water, a fire station, a new road, something like that, then it would fall within the definition of a minor subdivision. Next slide. That's just listing all of those items, which creates the definition of what a minor subdivision is. So here we have on this slide, it talks about the procedure of a minor subdivision. There is a stage that can be called the sketch plat stage, and the applicant has chosen to skip that, and that's fine in some instances. So we go to the next slide. So we see here is a vicinity map of the area. And at least my paper version has a blue box. I don't know why there's no blue box over the property up there. But anyway, you see it's actually in the center there. It's the C3 zoning. And then you've got M1 zoning to the north, C4 zoning to the northeast and east. You've got the PUD, which is that River Oaks subdivision under development. And then you also have R-8 to the southwest of the property, and then going around and completing the circle is M1 zoning on the property's west. So here we have the subdivision final plat layout. As stated by the chair, proposed area under application is 11.13 acres. The proposed number of lots is just one. Is any of the property in the 100-year floodplain? And that's no, so there's no floodplain at play here. No new public road is proposed. That's why it can stay within being a minor subdivision by definition. The water is the Horn Lake Water Association, as well as the sanitary sewer for both of those public service providers. The zoning of the subject property is C3. On this particular map, what I've tried to do is highlight the zonings that I mentioned earlier in that green color. And you can also see some of the features that the applicant is proposing. There's on the property now, which is basically kind of a grass field, there's a little bit of elevation change. Over on its west side, you can see that yellow box. There is an existing Verizon cell tower, and there is an easement, an access easement to that. And they were also proposing access easements on the east side, both of which would come from Nail Road, which is on the north or the top side of the slide, and then also from Highway 51 on the east side or the right-hand side of the slide. Next slide. So now we get into more of the specifics from the subdivision regulations. Here it deals with section 34-58. Once in a while I will mention something if they've done something extraordinary like to meet a factor, like we saw that earlier with the landscaping on the gas station. They did really well. Thought that was worth pointing out. Because when we start with this, we go through basically dozens of things that we check for, we look for to see if they're deficient or not. And what basically is remaining, makes its way to the staff report or / PowerPoint. So these are the items that aren't met or need some type of clarification or adjustment by the applicant. So what's proposed what's required is public utility easements along basically the property's perimeter, and nothing was shown on the plat, so that's all deficient. But the requirement is actually 10 feet wide for a rear yard utility easement, and then it's 5 feet for the sides, and then so those are called for from the subdivision regulations. So we just asked that would be revised to meet the standards. Next slide. So I call this the kind of like the planning or zoning recheck. There's a segment in the subdivision regulations that has to do with the general suitability. So that basically it asks for, like we saw earlier with the rezoning request, it kind of asks for what's the flavor of the neighborhood, from a zoning and a land use standpoint. So what I've tried to present there is what's in the neighborhood. So as I mentioned earlier, to the north is M1, which is light industrial, which is actually the large, the 1.1 million square foot warehouse, the GXO facility in town. That's to the north, across the road. To the south is the PUD, which is under development, is that River Oaks 2 subdivision. That's 34 lots that they're doing. To the east is C4, which is a mixture of commercial uses, one of those being the gas station there. And to the west is C3, and then beyond the C3, there's actually some M1 zoning. There we go. Let me get caught up on my own notes. Okay, so here we've got individual minimum standards from the subdivision regulations, and we've seen these before. They seem to come up consistently. And so item D here has to deal with drainage, and E has to do with sidewalks. So D, there was no mention of site drainage on the plat. And then E, there was no sidewalks that were proposed. Next slide. So here, continuing on the minimum standards, this has to do with F, which has to do with water supply, G, sanitary sewer system, and K, which is erosion and sediment control. So I combined F and G there. They have a general note of the providers, which I mentioned earlier, and then item K, they don't make really any mention of any erosion or sediment control type plans. So we'd ask them to do that, add that. And so here in the end, we get this possible motion to recommend approval of the request to the Board of Aldermen with the following conditions attached. A, add utility easements on the plat per the subdivision regulation standards. B, add a note of how drainage will be handled via the subdivision plat. C, add sidewalks to the plat per city standards. D, add the location of public water and sanitary sewer lines. And E, add a note the subdivision and development will meet the city's requirements for erosion and sediment control. That would conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Barr. All right, do we have any questions for Director Barr?
So we're trying to combine two commercial lots in one, that.
Very good question. No, maybe Daniel could go back to one of the earlier slides. Yeah, thank you. No, this is basically, it's all one. It's all one. But what I've tried to do is I've tried to highlight the actual ingress, egress, which basically is fancy for saying in and out easements. And so I've tried to highlight those where they would be. But it's basically where you see the blue box all the way on the out. It's one parcel. And that's what they're proposing, is basically to formalize, instead of right now it's unplatted, it's not a subdivision. They're wanting to formalize basically the outside border through the subdividing process, and then along the way, provide these easements as well.
So, we're gonna okay, they have a meeting.
Yes, that's why they're suggested or whatever, because those are items that were either need clarification or were deficient as going through the application, and so that's why they're suggested as conditions to the request.
Any other questions for Director Barr? All right, so we have the applicant up here. If you just, or at least the engineer. So if you give your name and address, please.
Yes, sir. Robbie Jones, Jones Davis and Associates, 8849 Center Street, South Haven.
All right, thank you. All right, does anyone have, would you like to have, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, so we'll abide by the staff comments.
Okay, any questions?
What type buildings will be built here?
Ma'am, I don't know. I heard mention that he was possibly looking at maybe a grocery store.
That'll be good, yeah.
He hadn't, approached us with any kind of design.
Yeah. It definitely isn't a grocery store.
Any other questions? I do have a question, real quick. I was just looking at this one that has the actual overview, and I think that it may be just an estimate. Is the property line that close to the actual building that's there in the C4?
Yes, it is that close. I had to try to double check the measurement. Maybe Daniel could go one or two slides previous to get that picture. I think what you're referring to. There you go.
That one there, and I know that those on ours with the blue lines, it comes right down that.
Yes, it is very close there.
Is that going to be a problem in any way? I'm just wanting to make sure that that's not, because I know we got the easement that's on the other side of it. I just want to make sure that's not going to become an issue.
I think right now, even though you can't see it on your version where the blue box is or whatever, I think there's a property line that's already underneath that. So I think the property line already exists there.
Okay. Right. I just wanted to make sure and clarify. So do we have a motion?
After review of application, case number 291, FDFB, request for a subdivision final, FDFB.
You're reading, you're on the wrong, we're on 2090.
We're on 2090? Case number 29, a request. After review of application case number 29, SDFB, a request for one lot commercial subdivision, final plat called Bailey Subdivision, consisting of 11 points. On Lake Planning recommended following
A3, okay. So we got a motion to approve with conditions A through E. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal, Commissioner Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner McGann, yes.
All right, it's passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Continuing on new business, case number 2091, a request for a subdivision final plat named, it is named the replat of Westbury Square Southeast to combine two existing lots into one commercial subdivision located at 4300 Goodman Road West. And this is the unassigned unofficial address in Horn Lake by WB Horn Lake LLC, developer and MS Consultants Incorporated Engineer for land zoned as C4 Planned Commercial District, consisting of 1.49 acres plus or minus altogether. All right, once again, we get to hear from Director Barr.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. And as we had like the last one, we've got the definition of minor subdivision. I won't say any more about that. Next slide. Next slide. And again, here we pick up the actual requirements from the subdivision regulations for platting of and recording of subdivisions. Next slide. So here you can see the subject property bounded in the blue line. As you stated, the size is 1.49 acres. The number of lots, right now there's two. It's an existing subdivision, but what they're requesting to do is basically take the two platted lots and basically put them together and create one. We don't have an option in our subdivision regulations where a person could do that through like a lot line adjustment or something, an administrative type plat. So it comes before you again for review and then ultimate approval or denial by the governing body. Is any of the property in the 100-year floodplain? That's no. So there's no floodplain at play. The name of the existing subdivision is the Westbury Square Southeast. That's the actual name of the plat. The water is provided by the city of Horn Lake, as is sanitary sewer. Next slide. So this is the layout of the subdivision final plat. There were some revisions that were needed as far as the utility easements per the requirements of the city. On the plat, they do show the required 20 feet on the east side. They show 7.5 feet on the north side. And then, let's see. And then 30, 20, and 10 feet wide easements for the front or the south side of the property. And so they would need 10 feet for the rear, 5 feet for the west sideline, and then 10 feet for the front. Obviously, they could exceed it if they want, but they just can't go under the number. So we'd ask them to revise to meet the standards along the west and rear property lines. Next slide. Oh, you're already there. Very good. I guess I want to point out in the slide there, because I've got, as you see down there in the lower, kind of the lower left-hand side, there's two green lines. Yeah, thank you. Excellent. A 20-foot wide telephone easement and a 10 feet wide electrical easement. And so that green line is just indicating the width, but they actually run all the way across the property from east to west. I just didn't want to make multiple shades of multiple colors that could get confusing. So I just wanted to explain that. As we saw in the last one, we have the general suitability. And so the character of the neighborhood to the north is C4, which is vacant commercial. To the south, which is across the street, it's PUD, it's developing and a mixture of developing and undeveloped commercial. To the east, C4 commercial, it's the Walmart Supercenter. And to the west, C3 commercial, I believe it's Captain D's restaurant. That's just another slide I had, a little bit cleaner version. Next slide. And as we so often see that it needs attention with the subdivisions as far as minimum standards, we have drainage and sidewalks. There was no mention of site drainage on the plat. I did talk to the applicant on this item, and back when, before the Walmart Supercenter was developed, as there was an easement, a drainage easement that was designated. So if you've been out to the Supercenter, there's on the west side of it, there's a drainage detention area. So there is a formal agreement going all the way back to 2014 for the development of this property to basically drain into that detention area. So I've confirmed that from the applicant. So I have a condition later on to address item D, but item D doesn't need to be addressed, in my opinion, anymore, since I've got new information since this was written. Item E here, no sidewalks proposed. We'd ask them to put that either in note form or pictorial form on the plat itself. And then here we've got, talked about the minimum standards of water supply, sanitary sewer systems, and erosion and sediment control. We would ask them for F and G to provide the water and sewer service line locations to the subdivisions. And then item K, there's no real mention of any erosion or sediment control plans. We'd ask them to add that note and details to the plat as well. So next slide. And so this is a possible motion for you to consider. Recommend approval to the Board of Aldermen with the following conditions attached. A, revise utility easements on plat per the subdivision regulation standards. B, clarify how drainage will, oh, we can skip B, there we go. And then we got so C, which would become B, add sidewalks to the plat per city standards. D would become C, add location of the public water and sanitary sewer lines. And then E would become D, add a note, the subdivision and development will meet the city's requirements for erosion and sediment control. That would conclude the presentation.
All right, do we have any questions for Director Barr? All right, is the applicant here? Please state your name and address.
Hello, my name is Victor Ramirez, 7068 Ledgestone Commons, Bartlett, Tennessee.
Thank you. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, not this time.
Okay. Anybody got any questions for our applicant? They're gonna make it easy on you today. All right, do we have a motion?
Do you know what type of building will be built here? If it'll be retail or a restaurant or?
Commercial restaurant. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Commercial rest,
Yes, sir, commercial restaurant.
And that's why you have to, that's why you're combining the two, because you need more space.
That's correct.
All right, any, we don't have anything, can y'all, we have a motion?
After review of application case number 2091, SDF, a request for a subdivision, final plat, the plat of line by WB LLC. Or land zone. And recommend request A, that B.
Yes, the B item has been met, yes.
A.
So the motion is to approve with conditions A through E, but not including B? Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Roll call.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal, Commissioner Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
yes.
Commissioner McGann, yes.
All right, it has been approved. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes all of our new business. On to other business. Mr. Barr, an update on other land use planning items. I'm going to give it back to you because you gave us this nice little piece of paper from your presentation from the intern.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, as if you couldn't have figured it out by now, the department has planning intern, and that's Andrew Hawkins-Smith. He's been here at my right. And I can't say enough about him. He's very well skilled. He's very polite. He's perfect, I think, really for the department. I'm so glad we have him. We've got him doing a lot of review on sign permit applications, which that's some of the most difficult stuff there is in zoning is sign permits. So we've got him doing that. He's also doing, with his own computer and his own GIS software, he's been doing some maps, some of it in preparation for what we feel that the city will probably opt in. I'm guessing on some aspects of medical cannabis in the state, in the city, excuse me. So he's been working on some GIS maps for that, and he's been working on, we should have soon from the county an updated zoning map. And so the county wanted us to kind of go back to like the year about 2016 and double check some of the rezoning changes that the city has made. And so he's been working on that to double check those. And so I'm really, really pleased with Andrew. He's great, and I'm glad he's here. And so he's a student with the University of Memphis, and I'll probably let him take it off here in just a second. But he had a summer class, and he had some planning takeaways that he would like to share that hopefully that you would find, at least I found edifying. So from here, I'll take it away to Andrew.
Be here. Okay. Hello, I'm Andrew Hawkins-Smith. Nice to meet y'all. So this summer, a few days ago, I just got back from Italy. Our university had a summer class for the planning students, and we went to a suburb of Catania called Paterno, and we met with the community there. We met with the residents. We met with the mayor, the deputy mayor, their city officials, and the volunteer organizations, their church, their children there, the Italian Scouts, everyone in town to help make that one suburb better. So Catania is a city of about 311,000 people, and the suburb that we worked in had about like 48,000 people. And they were both very different, but after the class, I took some time to go to the big city and see what the differences were between Paterno and Catania, and I had a lot of takeaways to bring back. So for Catania and Paterno as well, they both had very good street connectivity. This right here is Catania. It's the center of downtown, but pretty much the whole city is structured the same. So it was built on a grid system, and there were no cul-de-sacs, no dead ends, everything connected to something else. And so what I noticed was there was no traffic in the whole city. There were cars parked everywhere and people walking everywhere, but there were no traffic jams. There was nothing at a standstill anywhere. And I thought this was really interesting because I've read before that when you put things on a grid system and have enough things spaced out properly, you won't have this, sudden influx of cars and people trying to go to the same place. And this also makes it safer for evacuations if there's big emergencies nearby. And so this is important for this area because it lies at the base of a volcano, the most active volcano in Europe, Mount Etna. And so they're always focused on making sure everyone has a safe, quick way to get out. Next slide. And so also, kind of hard to see here, but all those little blue dots are bus stops. And so all throughout the city, there's bus stops everywhere. You can get from one point of any part of the city to another part. They all generally come by every 25 minutes. It's really cheap, and people love to use them. And also, there's like these little red dots going diagonally up there. That's their subway system. So they have a bus system and a subway system. And I just thought that was really interesting. Next slide. And so what I found the most interesting, though, was the way they see streets, the way they use their street there. So, like I said, everything was based on a grid system. And so, of course, you know, they're for cars, at least the way we see it in America. You know, all streets are for cars. But every few blocks, they had a street blocked off just for dining. And so all these restaurants have dining tables outside. People can walk through. If you can like fit your bicycle through, you can ride through. But it depends on the size of the street. So some of these that we would call alleys are just all dining tables. And then a lot of these are main pedestrian walkways that also had dining areas. And then over on the left side, that would be sort of their main street. It's their main commercial street called Via Etna. And that street is reserved only for pedestrians and buses. But they don't block it off because obviously the buses have to get through. But everyone just kind of respects that you know, only the bus can drive on that street. And then when the bus isn't there, people can just walk in the street and you know, any part of the street whenever they want. Next slide. And so these are some other interesting spaces. There's a lot of areas where the street just kind of meanders into a corner of restaurants and alleys. And so, like on the left, you can kind of see where cars are parked on the side of the road, but then it turns into a square behind that. But shops started putting up tables in front, and it's the same thing right here. This is all outside. I know it kind of looks kind of hard to tell there, but they put strings across the buildings and put umbrellas on top. So it gives it a really cozy atmosphere, but this is all outside. And this is very, very common. Most Italians prefer to eat outside. It's really, really hot there. And you get real sweaty and you kind of like sweat on the table and you're really hot, but everyone just embraces that. And they just enjoy their food and drink outside. Next slide. And going on that same theme, like in that top right corner right there, those are dining areas and, oh, sorry. Yeah, it's a street, but on the right side, it's all dining tables. And on the right side, it's like where cars can go through. And then they put a lot of plants in the median there. And just under that, there's a bar right there. That's the other side of it. And at that bar, and this is also really, really common, the other side. Yeah. There's nowhere to sit inside, so a lot of Italians like to stand and drink and stand and eat. And you get your drink and you go outside, and there's little tables attached to the wall outside. So you get your drink and you go out walking, and you can set your drink on the little tables attached to the wall outside. And this is very common there, and it's the same thing with that little area right there. Those are bars and restaurants. I know it looks really fancy, but that's kind of how they do it there. And so you can get your drink and go walk around. And there's no laws against drinking and walking and taking your drink anywhere. You just take it wherever you want and go wherever you want. And if you scroll over to the other pictures, it's the same concept over there. They put the umbrellas on top of those strings, and that's a pizzeria. You go around that corner, go down that way. These are all dining areas outside. That place dining only outside. And then, yeah, and those ones right there, that's, one of their main piazzas on that top corner. And then, yeah, people just love to hang out at night. There's no time limits for anything. People can walk anywhere. There's no gates, there's no fences. It was really, really interesting. Next slide. And so another very interesting thing I saw was, there was a lot of mixed-use buildings there, and I did not see any form of Euclidean zoning. I didn't see any strict separation of uses anywhere in the city. However, what I did notice was pretty much everywhere I walked, the bottom floor of everything was commercial, and then the top floor of everything was residential. And so that's kind of why no one there needs to drive anywhere, because every few blocks there was a coffee shop, pastry shop, restaurants, bars, clothing stores, grocery stores, stores for very specific things. And like, one store would just be for shoes, one store would just be for bread, one store would just be for salami and meat, one store would, just be for like very specific things. But it was block to block, and it was mixed up in a way to where you could walk to pretty much anything you can think of. And so that's why you just see people walking everywhere, and not having to get in the car and jump on the highway for anything. And I put that picture of the aerial view there just to show how it was really like that, and like for miles and miles. And then, however, I will say that since there was that mix of commercial and residential everywhere for miles and miles, right there along the coast of the sea, that seemed to be where the industrial was concentrated. And so I'm still trying to research and see if they had that zoned that way, or if it just naturally migrated that way, because of course that's where the ships are. And then you can kind of see like there's a train line that goes that way, so the ships go there, the trains go there, and also that's a major fishing port, and this is it's one of the biggest economies in the city is fishing. It's a very seafood heavy city, and then also you can kind of see a lot of the parks there. They make sure to put parks like every 5-10 blocks or so, which really isn't even far because their blocks are very small. And so pretty much every direction you can walk, you're a few minutes away from some kind of piazza, some kind of park, some kind of square. And that's why you don't see everyone just like crowding one place. It's very, very spread out. You can go to a new park or a new square every day for the whole month and never get bored of the same place. Next slide. And another interesting thing, you can see this in really, really old cities. At the end of a lot of streets, you'll see what you're trying to get to at the very end. A lot of times this will be like a church, this will be like a piazza or some kind of important building. And so in a lot of places in the city, if you're getting kind of lost, you can look this way and see like, oh, the church is way down that street. And then if you look this way, it's like, oh, the piazza's way down there. And you can kind of just tell where everything is just walking block to block. And I found that very, very interesting. And plus it makes it kind of fun to walk because it makes the streets really pretty and it draws you in. Next slide. And so yeah, another thing I noticed was the setbacks. Everything was up to the sidewalk everywhere, and this does make it a lot easier to get places faster. And this was very important for the summer because it was really, really hot. So the temperature is just right about the same as here in Mississippi or Tennessee. It was really, really hot there, and it doesn't really rain there. So having these buildings close together, it actually protected us from the sun. So, when the sun is directly over, it's really hot, but just, starting to get into the afternoon, you get that shade and it's really nice again. And so I feel like this really encourages people to walk a lot more. And I think it also helps keep the city clean because when you don't have those large setbacks, it's less for the businesses to clean, it's less for the cities to clean. And also, I think it's better for the businesses because everything is closer together. So you're not having to get back into your car and go drive to another place and then get back in your car and go drive to another place. If you're on foot and everything's right in front of you, you're more likely to go into the shops one after another. And you know, the Italians are always at their doors trying to welcome people in. So I think that's something that you know we can probably try to do a lot better in American cities. Is stop encouraging us to go into your car after every single place you go to, because I think that actually makes you spend less time in the city and go do less activities. Next slide. And yeah, so there were piazzas everywhere. Yeah, like I said, they were never closed. You see people there all times of day, in the middle of the day, late at night, after midnight. And some of these piazzas are connected to those mixed-use buildings where, like at the bottom right there, you see restaurants. And, you know, there's bars, gelato places, pasta places, all along those bottom floors. And that's right next to the piazza. So they really encourage you to just hang around as long as you want. And it was just really, really peaceful. Next slide. And so after going to some of the bars, and by the way, they like to eat late. Even the fancy places, they close at around midnight. And then, like, if it's kind of more of the rowdy places, they're open till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. But I left around midnight, and as I was, actually it was around 1. So as I was walking back to my hotel, I stumbled upon this basketball court. And it was really interesting because this is one of the things we studied in our class as kind of a side topic on like crime prevention tactics that a lot of U.S. cities do. I played some basketball for a little bit and then talked to them, and they said that the court doesn't close, and people love to come to there and play and exercise, and it's really good for the kids there because otherwise there wouldn't be much else to do. And I bring this up because some of the things that I studied in a lot of other cities, like places in Los Angeles and cities in New Jersey, a lot of them did programs to where, as part of a crime reduction experiment, Los Angeles in particular, they opened up parks to be have sports programs at nighttime in really dangerous neighborhoods, and that actually reduced crime because it took people off the streets that were going to go out and vandalize and steal and race around. And so when they unlocked the gates, and they did have police monitoring these areas, but it actually, they used the same amount of police to monitor these areas, and the crime did go down because, like they said, it gave them something to do. Next slide. And then, of course, it's a very pedestrian place in general, and so there were sidewalks on every single street that I could find. Literally every single place I walked, there was a sidewalk. And it didn't matter if it was the main street, the little streets, what kind of building there was there, it didn't matter. Every street had a sidewalk. And I noticed that there was a very strong respect for pedestrians there. Cars were not in a hurry to get anywhere. They didn't speed down the street. If someone was walking in the street, you know, everyone would just let them walk, and you know, crowds would just walk it was just a normal, expected thing there. And of course, a lot of people drive motorcycles too. You can see in that middle picture, there's tons of motorcycles parked along the side of the street there. Next slide. And then, yeah, that brings me to parking. There were cars everywhere, but I noticed no one was driving them. They were all parked. And like, if you look in the satellite view, I know I zoomed in on that satellite view right there, but if you get on Google Earth and look all around the whole city looks like that. And walking around, it really was like that. No one was really driving it anywhere because once you found a parking spot, you were just blocks away from whatever you needed. And pretty much all these streets had free parallel parking. There was no parking meters, no parking garages, no big parking lots, nothing like here in the United States where every single store has its own parking lots for its own business. And you see signs everywhere that says, this parking spot is for this business only. You park here, you'll get towed if you don't shop in here. There's none of that over there. You just find a parking spot anywhere on the street, and then you go walk to wherever you want and leave it there for however long you want. And so I thought that was really nice. I think that's so. Those are just some takeaways that I found and that I noticed worked really, really well there. I'm not saying you can do all of that here, right away, or I know everything's a process, but I just noticed that the people there were really happy. They were, had everything they needed around them. It just seemed to work well for everybody there. I just think that's something that a lot of American cities kind of try to aspire to. And I know we're a really, really young country, and so it's we don't have that 3,000 years of planning and experience, trying things one after another. But I think it can be good to look back at history and see what cities have done for thousands of years. Take what has worked the best, and try to put it into current planning practices.
Thank you very much for that report. Sounds like you had fun while you were there too.
Yeah.
And also thank you for your help with, I think Director Barr needs the help. So thank you for that service. All right, do we have anything else y'all would like to talk about? We can sit here. Nope. Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Any second? Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank y'all.